Good morning, Michael. How are you?
Good morning, Jenny White. Good morning to all the Ropians out there.
The Ropians.
And
I like that.
And the followers of one of the best investigative journalists in the state of Oklahoma, Mary at V1SUT. Thank God for Mary and the following that she has also.
Amen. Amen. I mean, can you imagine what would happen if we did not have Mary out there?
Oh, I know. Let alone the massive holes she's blown in education with all these corrupt school districts and these coaches and teachers and superintendents, but just the ancillary things she does also, just like what we're going to talk about today, which I'll go at the end of the show. I'm going to go on a mini tirade for this LGBTQ plus demolition of the United States.
Okay, well, let's do something really fast because this ties in to what we're talking about with Mary today. So I'm going to share the screen for an article that I read. I'm not joking. Just like 2 minutes before we came on air. Here is the article.
That's how effective and efficient Jenny White is right there.
No, that's how dedicated she is. I don't know about efficient, but I'll call it dedicated because I'm still, I'm looking at stuff. Okay, so look at this. House Oversight Committee, $241 million spent on transgender surgeries and treatments on animals. Millions of taxpayer dollars were spent on transgender surgeries and treatment on animals, House Oversight Committee Chairman Eli Crane confirmed yet again this week. Okay, here's the, it's something called the White Coat Project. Some guy named Justin Goodman has been testifying. In a lot of these cases, they involve mice, rats, monkeys who are being surgically mutilated and subjected to hormone therapies to mimic female to male or male to female gender transitions, gender affirming hormone therapies, and then looking at the biological, psychological, and physiological effects of the gender transitions, looking at the effects of taking vaccines after you've transitioned these animals from male to female or female to male, looking at the size of their genitals changing after you put them on estrogen or testosterone therapies to transition them. So guess who is behind all of this? Do you know?
I don't know.
Here you go. The National Institutes of Health, U.S. Department of Agriculture, and likely other agencies are paying university labs across the country to perform invasive surgery and hormone therapies on lab animals to mimic gender transitions in painful and deadly experiments. Can I just ask, where is PETA? PETA, where are you?
Well, how about just letting Tony Fauci run like Frankenstein across this country for health reasons, health purposes? I mean, don't forget, he experimented on all those beagles. He took their voice. He took the voice box out of those dogs. If you really look at that guy, I mean, Robert Kennedy's book with Fauci was unbelievable. But all the AIDS stuff and the AZT stuff, and that they were purposefully, communicating that disease just for the AZT, chemical. I mean, it's unbelievable just how corrupt, how evil in one way that guy is in that office. I mean, it's insane.
Well, and here is a so this is another one. I don't know if anybody's seen this one or not. Let me just share this screen with this one. It doesn't quite tie in as well, but it's really interesting. All right, so everybody knows who this person is. He's my favorite, Ron Paul.
Yeah.
I love Ron Paul. He and his wife are like the nicest people I've ever met. Anyway, so Ron Paul has this, he's here. This is an X post. He's here talking about the gold in Fort Knox. So did you realize this? I had no clue that nobody has seen the gold in Fort Knox in 40 years.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's the same thing. They won't allow us to audit the Federal Reserve. Well, I mean, it all goes in, pretty much the same basket. But that whole gold, I mean, I could go in for hours on the whole gold deal, in this country. It's unbelievable, the manipulation.
Well, I ended up, I took this and, called out every single one of our senators and representatives and basically said, because I want people to know this, these people, particularly James Lankford, have been in DC since 2010. So I'll read you a tweet from Mr. Senator Lankford this morning. Our government has dropped the ball. We need to start repairing and restructuring the way it works, saving taxpayer money and restoring efficiency. It's time to stop fumbling and start scoring. Don't you love his football metaphor? He's like, I'm from Oklahoma. A football metaphor will gaslight people. So here's what I said. You are the government.
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to say.
You, James Lankford, are the government. Wait, I didn't say that. I said, what are you talking about? You've had the power to stop this all along. That's why you were sent to DC in 2010 to stop this. This is all on your head, Senator. I mean, I'm serious. I'm so sick of his garbagey gaslighting. The gaslighting is horrific from these people. Well, this is great. Let's go get those people. This bad government. You are the government.
Yeah.
What do you say? Let's get the government. What are you talking about? Are you that stupid, or are you just thinking people are that stupid and they're that easy to gaslight? It infuriates me. Sorry, Stephanie, but my blood pressure is up at the beginning of the show.
Yeah, he's a GOB. He's a good old boy. He's right in there voting yes on every single thing. Yes, send that money. Yes, do this. Yes.
Dana agrees with me that he's the government.
And that he 100%.
and agrees that he's an idiot. And I don't think he's an idiot, Dana. I think that's the worst part. He is and Stephanie says, isn't Stitt doing the same thing? Of course Stitt is doing the same thing. These people are like, the government is bad. And you're like,
yeah.
What?
Well, and still, I just love, anytime we talk about James, I just love to bring this up because it's still so mind-blowing to me. Don't forget, when Comey was on this, doing the hearing in front of the Senate Select Committee that James was on for all the Russian stuff, which we all know now was a complete hoax. The whole thing was completely made up.
Oh, yeah.
Comey literally said he was the leaker, giving those documents to his friend at the university. James had the next set of questions. Not one time did he ever say, hey, hang on a second. You're telling me you just said you're the leaker? You were given those documents? No. James went right off the script, just asking his stupid 4 or 5 questions, and that's it. I mean, that to me, that was the biggest traitor ship of all right there. I mean, it could have been so easy just to hang on a second. Let me see.
No, the biggest traitorship is when he agreed. And here's the other thing I think we have to do. I think we as the people need to put all of the names of our senators and representatives who agreed that January 6th was an insurrection after all we found out about that. See, I think we should put those things up, and I think those names up with a big bulletin board, on a big whatever board that just says, really? Traitors? I'm serious. Because I literally think people don't. I love Lisa. Did you not see what she wrote?
No.
Late to the party, but oh my gosh, y'all are head up and I'm here. Well, we can't go for too much longer because we've got to get Mary in here because everybody's going to get.
It's time to expose just every single day, shame and expose these people because they're literal traitors to the people and the Constitution that they're supposed to represent.
Wait, what's the Constitution again?
I don't know. In today's time.
All funding begins in the House. All funding in the House begins in the Appropriations Committee. Tom Cole is the chair. Before any bill hits the floor in the House, it goes to Rules Committee for the debate. I mean, and that's exactly the point. I mean, if we don't start calling these people out every minute of the day for this gaslighting nonsense, because it's just gaslighting. I mean, I swear, and anybody who wants to go in with a big on me with me, good night. Anybody who wants to go with me on a big billboard to put all their names on it, sign up and get going because I am absolutely, and that's true. I mean,
well, the only thing though, Jenny, I mean, I love that all this stuff's coming out. We're seeing how corrupt the government is. But if people don't start going to jail, if we don't start seeing some heads roll, I mean, it's like going to be a slap in the face. I mean, every one of these people need to be held accountable. I don't care how big or small the infraction is, they need to be held 100% accountable.
Well, but it's like what we're going to talk about with Mary in just a minute. These people have been in power so long that they've put the people in place in power that they've wanted, knowing that the people that they put in place in power aren't going to do anything about it anyway. So you're talking about, I mean, remember Robert Key's interview that we did on Friday? And he's like, well, we found that this was wrong. And you guys need to go to the website and look for that article because I actually put his Supreme Court filing in there and it literally shows every single piece of evidence that they had in this case and it's overwhelming. So Judge Jeff Virgin in Cleveland County and our entire Oklahoma Supreme Court they have no idea what the term justice actually means. They didn't do any, I mean, because all you had to do was look at the evidence. The evidence is overwhelming that there was election irregularity there by the state election board and nothing was done about it, nor was it looked at, nor anything else. And you've got to go there to the website and look for that article and look for the Supreme Court filing and start sharing that with people, because the only thing I think we can do is just hang them by their own petard. I mean, we've got to show, here's the evidence, you people were set up. But I don't want to go anymore because we need to talk to Mary. So I'm going to pull Mary in before we go any further. So Mary, maybe you can calm me down and get me to shut up this morning.
No, actually, you've got me thinking. The two articles, I didn't know that Fort Knox was actually the desolation of Smog from Lord of the Rings. There must be a big old dragon down there and nobody can look at the gold. And then the other thing that came to mind is, okay, so let's play devil's advocate. Let's pretend that we really do believe that you can change a human's gender, right?
Or a mouse or a dog, apparently.
Or a mouse or a dog. So even at the NIH, which has become evil, shouldn't they have done those animal studies before they did those actual interventions on thousands of children? I have no idea why that is going on. It's bewildering how much of our money is being used to subvert the will of the majority of the American people.
But don't you think that it's just, I mean, it's demonic. I mean, I'm just going to say that it's demonic. It's because why would you go after children? I mean, who other than the devil would go after children? And it's like so many forms of taxpayer dollars are going to so many forms of government to hurt children.
Well, I'll give it another name, and we're going to talk about that in this article today when we start talking about USAID funds. It is social engineering on our dime, is what I believe it is. So, and I'm going to go ahead and share that article. There we go. Thank you very much. So, you're probably very aware, it's all over the national news about everything that's going on in Washington, D.C. with the DOGE effort, the Department of Government Efficiency. They very recently brought who I'm calling America's 5 smooth stones. They're genius programmers, and there are many of them now working within DOGE, to the USAID. And for those who aren't completely familiar with how that started, it's the United States Agency for International Development, is USAID. And it started in 1961. JFK was our president, and it was originally founded to provide foreign aid and to counteract communism. So if you think, beginning of the Cold War, we're going to have this agency that spreads our ideals, democratic ideals across the globe, and also provides foreign aid where needed. That's how USAID started. And now we know from a particularly brilliant young woman, there are not just programs running algorithms, mapping all of our money in the United States, in the federal agencies in DC. This young woman, and she goes by @Data Republican on X. Her site is datarepublican.com. She calls herself a tool builder, and she has built a tool that allows us to search multiple databases and links all of this funding that came through USAID that we now know a whole lot of it was fraudulent. A lot of it was waste. A lot of it was turned back on the United States from an agency that was supposed to be for foreign assistance in the form of social engineering. And what she's found out is there are basically these 8 huge entities or NGOs, non-governmental organizations, that she's identified as sort of the foundation of this shadow government that has been pushing massive amounts of money in every direction around our country. Well, that money didn't stay in DC. It came to the states. And we're going to talk about just one way that it came to Oklahoma. But if you look at these 8 huge NGOs that are the basis of a gigantic spider web of NGOs where all this funding goes.
Hold on one second.
Okay.
I wanted to put this up because you were talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just think if people were to go find it, that they could see.
Absolutely. I kind of have it on mine too, but I'm going to let you do it. Yes. So this is Data Republican. You can see all the tools down on the left, the different ways you can search, the different ways you can connect money. You can put in a person's name to see if they're connected with any of these entities. You can see about federal grants that are declared, ones that are out there in the public, money, what kind of money they're getting there. And then you can see these huge maps of how these different organizations are loosely connected and money is flowing between them. You can't always see the amount that's flowing between the. Correct.
I haven't looked at that. So you can put an EIN for an NGO in it.
Yes,
and just stick a keyword like trans or whatever in it and see how that
Well,
works.
It's a little more restrictive than that. I would recommend using the EIN, take out the dash after the first 2 numbers,
okay,
and start to map these things. But when you look at the 8 huge entities that are the ones that are throwing this money out in all different directions, the officers of these are the UniParty. They are the UniParty in DC. Right now, you're going to hear a lot about Senator Tom Cotton, who's a Republican from Arkansas. He's very much working against the America First agenda in the Senate.
Tom Cotton is.
He is also,
because he was not like that when he started out.
It's a good point.
He wasn't. He was one of the big stalwarts up there at the beginning.
Well, it could be a matter of a good act, or it could be a matter that DC corrupts permanently once these young senators get there.
I do think there's that.
He is actually listed as the director of the International Republican Institute. So 2 of these 8 big pieces, one's on the Republican side, one's on the Democratic, but together they are throwing money in all different directions. People like Lindsey Graham, John Kerry, John McCain, Karen Bass, who is the mayor of Los Angeles, is listed as an officer on one of these entities. The vice president of communications for Reddit, Elise Stefanik, Joni Ernst, Stacey Abrams, Donna Brazil, the Democratic pundit. This is people from all sides of the aisle and all different interests within politics and federal money. They are a shadow government, they are well funded, and they are working inside the United States. So if you go back to, and you go on Twitter, if you want to see @DataRepublican, you can see and there's a link to the exact thread in the article that we're about to talk about.
Okay.
You can see who these 8 organizations are and who's currently on them. Of course, the officers have changed during the years. You know, John McCain was there once, and now Tom Cotton is there. But this is an ongoing, for a couple of generations, these folks have been running our government and engineering our society from behind the curtain.
Did you see, this is so interesting. So one of the first, she's got a Twitter thread built into her front page here. And she says, she writes to Bill Kristol, for you, the deep state is preferable because you were listed as the president of Defending Democracy, which is an indirect beneficiary of USAID through the Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors. You are exposed. And don't forget, I mean, we've had, we've had Julianne Romanello on the show so many times talking about these NGOs and the fact that these things are just the death knell for freedom in America. They just figured out a way to funnel money into the government by gaslighting Americans into believing that they were donating to good things. And Rockefeller Foundation, I mean, come on, Michael, how many times have we talked about it, is absolutely the worst. I mean, it was starting way back at the turn of the, let's see, I guess 1920 is when it really started getting its legs, and ruined the government, ruined it.
Also decimated.
Let me throw something up here real quick that I was going to bring up in a second. Plus, I want to say while I'm getting this, I want to say don't forget with Bill Kristol.
Yeah.
He was part of PNAC, Project for New American Century. He was one of the authors of PNAC, and PNAC specifically, okay, so that was pre 9/11. And in that, it specifically said that outside of a catalyzing attack on America, you know, they're never going to rebuild the forces. And that PNAC, in my opinion, was one of the initial lead-ins on 9/11. We don't have to go down that whole 9/11 deal, but he's been bad for a long, long time. Anyway, Jenny, you were talking about how far back this goes. This is NIH website. Let me get this a little bit bigger. You know, in my opinion, this all goes back to the eugenics movement in one way or another, which was, people have no idea how serious this whole eugenics deal was, how many tens of thousands of people were either sterilized or put to death or whatever to create a master race, you know, and it's unbelievable how people don't know that. Sorry to interrupt, but you know, that's how far back in this country's history these maniacs have been doing this kind of stuff.
That's exactly.
Well, and here's this guy. Don't you love this guy? Resume the Reese Committee. Yes. Yes. Love that guy.
No, and the way that they hide that, it does make you look back in history and go, these different things that we went through, whether it was that, whether we look into the medical part of this and during the whole 80s and 90s AIDS epidemic, how that was handled, all of these things make you look back. These 8 NGOs that Data Republican has identified as the base, all have as their purpose in some way, shape, or form defending democracy. So they've kept the original purpose of what was happening at USAID was counteracting communism. And so those labels kind of fit. We were defending democracy, but they've kept that label, and you see how they've continued to use it as, the Cold War came to an end, the Soviet Union crumbled. They continued to use defend democracy. And how much did we hear that as a message in our recent elections? Nancy Pelosi has always defended democracy. Everyone who's doing the will of the people is an existential threat to democracy. So this has been a decades-long calling card for the corrupt people in DC. Okay,
well, isn't that, Mary, isn't that part of the problem? Is everything goes back to this democracy, which is just mob rule by these people. I mean, you never hear them talk about republic in the actual people. All you hear about is democracy. I mean, I can't take it.
Right. And she talks about people like Tom Cotton. And I cannot tell you how the money flowed personally to people. But when you start to think about how do they get our elected representatives to go along with some of the social engineering that is happening, well, you start to look then and say, well, these people make a $200,000 salary while they're in Congress, and they end up leaving with $20 million in a few years. So there's money happening here that's going to individuals.
Yeah. Or they get them trapped in these sexcapade type of deals, and they've got blackmail information on them in one way or another. So it's either the money or the sex in one way or another. They're all compromised, in my opinion. I can't say all. Most of them are compromised in one way or another.
Well, and for the first time, we're getting to see behind the curtain to see the people that we assume by their actions were compromised. And now we understand that's probably the case. Okay, so I'm going to go down here and talk a little bit about Oklahomans for Equality. So when Data Republican came out with her thread, and she gave us these incredible tools, and let me tell you how impressed I am with this young woman. She is both deaf and mute. And she's telling people.
Is she really?
She is.
How did you find out these things about this person? That's so interesting.
It is interesting. If you think about the hiding behind false victimization that happens in the world, and then you have someone like her who has these real impediments, has to work so much harder at things, and that she is working to help save our country in such an impactful way with her skills and talents. I'm just so impressed. I just have to say that out loud.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's a group called Oklahomans for Equality. They're based out of Tulsa. And they've been around for 25, 30 years. If you know about the Tulsa Pride events, all of those kind of things, that's Oklahomans for Equality. They have a big building there. They do all kinds of services. They've been really big, and they have different chapters. Over the past, 10 years, they've been pushing local chapters into places like Bartlesville and Tahlequah and these smaller towns, trying to get big pride events there, trying to push things related to education, trying to foster LGBT educators, those kind of things that you see that most of Oklahomans feel like they've been fighting with the books, with the contents, with the talk of adult sexuality in schools. This is an LGBT advocacy group. If you look into Data Republican's information, and right here on the screen, you can see that, and I'm going to make it as big as I can.
Yeah, I was going to say, hit the, there you go. Oh, so much better. Yay.
Okay, good. So if you look at this is straight, this graph is right here. This line is straight out of at Data Republican. And what it says is over 92% of the funds that this entity was running off of in that tax year come from taxpayer dollars. Now, that is something I have covered this organization pretty extensively because they were working really hard in Bartlesville against local efforts and a petition from thousands of local citizens to stop adult-oriented entertainment in their public spaces, like in Unity Square, which is their main center park, right? They were fighting very hard through their local chapter. There was an attorney involved. And I know a lot about this organization from this. The two organizers of that chapter in Bartlesville are actually the ones that filed the personal protective order against a street preacher to shut him up, to keep him from coming to city council meetings on this petition. And it ended up going all the way to the Supreme Court. and there was a 5-4 decision that says, scary, 5-4 in Oklahoma. It should have been 9-0. A 5-4 decision said, no, these activists can't be using PPOs to weaponize and silence the opposition, which is the majority of Oklahomans.
Right.
So if you know about that, they always operated as though they were a grassroots organization. They operated as though it was private funding coming in that was helping them do everything. And we always knew that the George Kaiser Family Foundation was involved because they're the number one upfront public sponsor of the Tulsa Pride activities. So if we go down and we look, so basically what this says is their total contributions for that time were $767,000. And this is saying only 60,000 of it is coming from someplace else. 707,000 of it is coming from taxpayer dollars. That shocked me. I did not assume that, and I don't think anyone thought that. So if you go look at their 990 for that time, all of this lines up. She's pulling from public databases that say this is the money that they're getting, right? They say on their 990 that their purpose is minority community center operation, cultural and educational programs, and event facilities. And it also says that they engage in lobbying, which they do. They fight things like when Oklahoma decided there would only be 2 gender markers on its legal documents. They had attorneys in-house that were helping people change their gender marker against those rules. They fight against all kinds of legislation in education, pushing a progressive agenda. So if you look at their website, it's pretty clear that although Oklahomans and Americans are providing the bulk of the funding for this group, which is a shocker, that we never voted for things like on their website affirming these LGBTQIA plus youth resources to schools and educators and counselors, bringing these chapters to rural communities so that they can bring drag events that include children, keeping the books in schools that talk about adult sexuality. We never voted for those things. And if you look at their Facebook page, it's even crazier. So this money is going to help organizations of people who identify as bears to meet. If you don't understand the bear culture, that is basically large, manly, hairy, gay men meeting others like that. And if you don't understand how this relates to youth and dangers to youth, the term cub in the bear community.
Oh, no.
Yep. It's a young man who needs to be trained up in the quote unquote bear culture. The Tulsa leather community, they have these initiatives about pushing the history of LGBT people. They have the queer educator meetup that they sponsor. So we want to make sure that our educators find ways to make their classrooms more inclusive. We have Girl Scout troops that we want to make sure trans girls are in with other girls, and something called relationships outside of the box. So we can make sure that we mingle with others in what they call complicated relationships.
Complicated. Good. Okay.
Right. So these are things.
Steph says, you mean grooming?
Exactly. When you start to talk about some of these things, you can't help but think, what effect is this having on youth? And social engineering. Being in Oklahoma, we know, and we say it over and over again, 77 out of 77 counties voted for Donald Trump. And he just said, knock it off with all of this stuff. So how did they play themselves off as a nonprofit where people were giving their own money as charitable contributions? Well, it was all a shell game through USAID, and I go through how that actually works. So how it works is, if you look at this, you're able to track some money that goes to this organization. There are other, like CauseIQ and other databases that make it easy to access the publicly available information. So for Oklahoma for Equality, we can track this some $80-some thousand that goes back, let's see here, over 22 years. So $83,000 in grants over 22 years, okay? The numbers we were talking about were in the 700-some thousand per year.
Right.
So it looks like you know where the grants are coming from, but you really don't. If you go,
well, hold on. Let's talk about a couple of those. Fidelity Investments Charitable Gift Fund, American Online Giving Foundation, and Flint Family Foundation?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So those are 3 organizations that openly gave to Oklahomans for Equality in Tulsa. Now, if you go looking for the bulk of the money, which would be the 92% that Data Republican has identified, you're not going to find it. You go look at their 990 form, and it's all of the rest of the money is listed as restricted. Well, how can we do that? If public grants need to be out there in the open, how can we be hiding them behind the 990?
Yeah, but we do the same thing with dark money, though.
Yeah.
We do.
Mary, I mean, that's what we talked about before, is that they've created the IRS has created these rules, or the Congress has allowed the IRS to create these rules that basically give cover to everybody who wants to fight us on anything.
Correct. And someone made a comment on X to me the other day that said, this is a lot like Jenny White's work with dark money. And I said, it really is, except for now we're into the federal grant kind of world. Well, if we look at it and we go, okay, they got $86,000 over 22 years, then the rest of it, and we can see where these 3 grants come from. I always assumed that the rest of it was private donations. It must be, right? On their 990 filing, they have to give a justification for charity status every single year. And they say it's either, quote, substantial part of their support is from a government unit or from the general public. That's how they get away with being a charity on their IRS forms. Well, if it's not listed as a grant, it's gotta be from the general public. Wrong, it's not. According to Data Republican in their charity funding tool, this USAID money moves through multiple layers. Various entities handle it, they shuffle it around, and they redistribute it. Essentially.
Well, but that makes sense, though, right? I mean, if you don't want to know where it's going, you're going to, it's why, businesses and corporations who are trying to keep their assets secret do that. They send it out to the Cayman Islands, then they turn around and send it back to the Bahamas. And then they do all of that just to keep it, on the QT.
Exactly. And they can redefine it when it moves through these entities. So government money comes from one of these big 8 organizations that Data Republican has identified, and that Congress people and influential folks from around the country are sitting on as directors, right? And they're working together, obviously. They funnel them out as government funds, and then they move through this web of different NGOs, and they're split up and sent back out as charitable funds. So once these things take them in, they can redefine them as no longer federal funds and hide them. Essentially, that's what's happened. So this is, and I know this is kind of blurry and hard to see, but the point is getting a grip on what this looks like. This little yellow circle here is Oklahomans for Equality. And you can see the spider web of organizations that this money moves through. When you start
my goodness.
You start to zoom in on that, right? And you see all of these lines, and some of them are defined by money amounts. A whole bunch of them are not. The ones defined by money amounts would be the ones that we saw. The 3 grants that we saw were publicly disclosed. The rest of these lines going to Tulsa Community Foundation, that then you can go 3 steps. It's like 6 steps from Kevin Bacon. You're back at the Rockefeller Foundation. That's how this money is moving around. Some of it disclosed, a whole lot of it not. In this case, 92% of it not disclosed as federal funding. So when you get in a little closer, and this is sort of searched from another aspect within the database, we really start to see with Oklahomans for Equality that the Tulsa Community Foundation and the George Kaiser Family Foundation are sort of the local funnels.
Yeah. But I mean, here's the thing though, Mary, we have known that for years. And the worst part about it, I'm just going to come right out and say it, the Republicans. So Julia can back me up on this. So I believe it was 2012, we started figuring out how much money the George Kaiser Family Foundation was giving to establish, daycares here in Oklahoma. And, most people are like, well, it's a daycare. People have to work. Well, here's the thing. You're paying as much for daycare as you're getting out of your job, usually at this particular thing, only for kids to go into government schooling before they're even able to talk. And people don't equate those things together. But the reason why we're seeing such a shift to the left in this country isn't because of universities. It's because of the whole freaking system from birth to university.
Mm-hmm. It is. And if you look at Tulsa, it's so strange that Tulsa is in Oklahoma, but because of some of these influences, it might be the most captured education system in the country.
Yeah.
From birth through education. There's over $1 billion that the Kaiser family has put into education over the years. They have a lot of pull. So going back to this, we really have to look at why are U.S. tax dollars being funneled through things like the Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, National Endowment for Democracy, global communities, and where we used to sort of assume that progressive billionaires like George Kaiser in Oklahoma and George Soros globally were putting their own money because they were just that rich into these things. It turns out a lot of this money was ours being used against us.
Rich people never use their own money. That's why they're rich.
Well, and if you think about how George Soros made his money, it's a believable scheme. He undercuts the finances of whole governments. He had a lot of money. I believed that he was using mostly his own money. From what we know in the last few weeks, it doesn't really look that way. But then you start to look at the parts that we can't say definitively, but we can sure raise doubt. Where is this money coming from? Where is this federal money that's funneling through these things? And you look at the Tulsa Community Foundation. Okay, one thing I want to point out, if you look at the bottom here, the Tulsa Community Foundation and the George Kaiser Family Foundation are in the exact same office. Okay, so we can make up all the EINs we want for things, but this is one effort. This is one staff working on certain social engineering projects within Oklahoma. Here's just one example of a big grant. $720,000 is coming from Housing and Urban Development. And this is for youth homelessness programs. Okay. How much of that is flowing to Oklahomans for Equality? And taxpayers have no idea. We don't know. We don't know. How good has the auditing been on those funds? We don't know. We don't know if it's any. We don't know if it's all. We don't know. So if you keep looking, Department of Agriculture, here's a program for another $373 million that is to get fruits and vegetables to low-income Oklahomans. Are we sure that that's what's happening with all of that money? So you start to see there's all these pools. These are just two examples of pools of big government money that are going all over the place. And somehow money's ending up at things like Oklahomans for Equality.
Well, maybe there aren't enough trans people getting local produce.
It's scary. Our government has gotten so big that we cannot even chase the amount of money that's been out there. And when you stop and think about things like deficits and how that has affected our economy and how our government is paying what they're paying in interest and how crushing that's been, how it's affected your ability to buy the things that you need. If we truly could get rid of all this waste, we might be flush. We might actually have money in the bank in our federal government if we could get rid of what's happening here.
Yeah. How many trillion, Michael, how many trillions did they find that the Treasury Department was giving out that had no?
$4.5 trillion, something like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So to your point, Mary, $4.5 trillion that the Treasury was giving out.
That was just had no name on it. They couldn't track anywhere where it went to.
Exactly. So none of this, never in my life have I been at a point, or any of us, I believe, where we could see that the genie's coming out of the bottle and it cannot be put back in.
Well,
I mean, this is praise God in heaven above. This is a good
and just think
American.
this is only a small part of what's been audited or exposed. I mean, think of the black budget side on the military. Think of the Federal Reserve. Think of these larger organizations. Think of if they went into the banking system itself and looked. I mean, it's just mind blowing. I mean, it's probably, hundreds of trillions of dollars in one way or another that you just have no idea about.
But let me ask you this question, though. Do you not remember, and this may have been Dr. No who did this, when he first got to the Senate and he started doing his little, what were they, the little something book of federal spending or whatever. Remember that? I mean, Tom Coburn. And one of the big things that came out was, like the DOD was spending $700 and something on a regular ball peen hammer, and that made all the news, and everybody was like, oh my God, and a $27,000 toilet seat. And everybody was freaking out. But then what happened?
Yeah, nothing.
It just
this much happened.
Mm-hmm. And if you look back at George Kaiser, this is just the latest iteration of it. So this was from previous reporting.
That's it, Julia.
From Visit. Yeah.
That's what it was. It was that was Tom Coburn's publication that he put out, the Waste Book.
Yep. But Kaiser was involved with donation bundling for Barack Obama. There was a big scheme where basically donation bundling is funneling taxpayer money to politically like-minded people, your supporters, the rich people. If you're a politician, through their foundations.
Yeah.
Kaiser was involved in the now bankrupt. He owned a third of Solyndra, which received a $535 million loan. It was a solar panel green energy grift. That was forgiven, that defaulted loan. So $535 million of our dollars went to something, right? And they have over $1 billion with a focus in early childhood education and public education flowing in Oklahoma.
Yes, and they give us, it was at one point when Julie and I were studying it, $10 million for pre-K, essentially, to institute pre-K in Oklahoma. Over $10 million.
And those add up fast. So when we saw pornographic pro-LGBT books being pushed and you said, who could possibly be sponsoring this and supporting this? And you thought about all the people you know in Oklahoma. And I hate to use the word, I have a pretty diverse group of people that I know. I didn't know anybody that wanted that. Well, it turns out we were funding that through federal dollars. So one more thing that I do want to say about Oklahomans for Equality is that we previously reported that they'd had an embezzlement. So I caught on one of their 990 forms when I was looking at their influence in Bartlesville, that if you look at their 990 form, in their 2020 990, they basically say they had an apparent embezzlement, that it was discovered in September of 21, and that they think 140,000 and another 20,000 approximately were taken. And they say there's an investigation in progress. And I discovered that probably in 2023. And I thought, I didn't hear about that. So I asked for records. I asked for the Tulsa Sheriff, the Tulsa Police Department. Did anyone ever report this? Was there ever an investigation? Did open records request? It had never been reported. So $160,000 approximately walked away from this organization. And at the time I reported, boy, if I were a contributor to this, because this is America. If you want to support the Pride event, it's America. You're allowed to do that with your own funds. I'd be really upset if I supported a charity and the money walked away and they did nothing. Why didn't they report? Did they not want the hit to their reputation? Did they not want the scrutiny into their finances? Now we know. So in 2023, when our reporting came out associated with the Bartlesville thing, that they had this embezzlement, they couldn't hide it anymore. So a couple of years later, after the embezzlement, they went ahead and reported it to the police. The
A
gentleman,
couple of years later,
when it became public that they had hidden this embezzlement after we published, they came out, and finally, this man, Paul Morgan Allen, who was their former treasurer, was more recently arrested. So he was arrested last year for this embezzlement. But had we not brought it forward, they were not interested in anyone digging into their finances in any form of a criminal investigation. And now we know that $160,000 could very well have been public funds. They had also, in the previous article, double dipped on COVID PPP funds, and it was around the time of the embezzlement. So we were sort of thinking that those might be public funds. Now with @Data Republicans tools, we're able to say it is highly likely that that money that walked away with this man was our money. So that's just one example of what we are coming to learn with all of the efforts of the programmers that are working with Doge in DC, and all of the efforts of this young woman who's put together this database. The links to her tools are in the article. So if you go to V1SUT.com and read the article, you can link straight to her tools. And I encourage, there's a bunch of warriors in this comment box. I encourage all of them to go do some digging, because the task is massive to start to understand where all of this money went in our state and what it was used or misused for. I know there's one person in the comment box here who actually sent me something about, in Oklahoma City, a youth homeless shelter that is specifically for, it's inclusive. So they focus on trans and alternately identifying youth.
Yeah.
And that they're getting a massive amount of money through the federal government. Yeah. So I so appreciate that. She knows where she is here. And that's she has shared that on visits at V1SUT on Twitter. If you want to go look at what she's found, it's pretty shocking. So, Michael, I think it's time for you.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking, I'm not against anybody, personal preference to whatever, if they want to dress up or, love whoever. I don't care about any of that in any way. But, Jenny, you kind of said it earlier, the shift to the left in all this. What is the shift to the left? It's literally a shift to the government. That's what it is. The government is the left. The government, the left is dependence. The right is independence in one way or another. The white, on the right, we have a family unit that is literally independent of the government, where the other side is not. It drives me up the wall. But just thinking about that, like what you just said, Mary, when you think about this whole thing, look at all the work we've done on the green side, Jenny. Would the whole windmill and all of that alternative energy even exist without all the government intervention, without all the government subsidizing the entire deal? No possible way. It's the same thing with this LGBTQ, all this. Without, we thought all this time that, these were, probably some kind of semi-organic movement. They're not. It's completely orchestrated. And I'm going to go as far as to say they're fraudulently orchestrated to destroy the family in one way or another, because that is the ultimate goal of the government, is to, destroy the family.
Mm-hmm. So you remember when Barack Obama called us AstroTurf? Remember, over the whole Obamacare thing, we were fighting and we were called AstroTurf. You've got to remember that name callers don't call you any name that they're not familiar with themselves.
Yeah.
So every time you hear people name calling, or calling people something, it's because, it's deflection. It's deflection.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm AstroTurfing all of this stuff, but I'm just going to call them that. And then they won't look at me. So we've got to get into that habit when we have representatives. And by the way, we've still got a video we need to show. When we have representatives who call people political animals. Oh, I'm sorry. That was the state governor. call people political animals, or, fill in the blank. It's because they know, I mean, that's them. They're pointing at their reflection in a mirror and trying to deflect from that by throwing it off on you. Do you not remember the thing when we were kids? I'm rubber, you're glue, bounces off me and sticks to you.
Yes. And Michael, I
Because
think
politics are so elevated in intellectualism.
Michael, I think you're spot on in that if you dig into these things and you cover them and you're looking for trends, the separation of children from the family is an underlying trend. And it is it really came to a height here in the last few years where parents were finding themselves in this ideological custody battle for their own children. And if you think about government funds flowing to a youth shelter that particularly welcomes trans identifying youth, you've got kids now who have been destabilized by this ideology. They're questioning who they are. They're dealing with mental health issues, spontaneous gender dysphoria that we know went rampant, increased by 36,000% over the few-year period. It was just insane. So now they're pushing against their parents because their parents are trying to bring them back to solid reality. And our money gave them a place to run in their tantrum into the arms of these NGOs who have these homeless shelters. It's really a scary thing where they're going to affirm mental illness rather than help treat it. It really is a wedge coming between families. We see it in schools, we see it in services, we see it in the efforts of community schools, which I will tell you, I think those started years and years ago as an honest effort to meet kids' needs, basic needs that weren't being met so that they could learn. It has morphed into something so incredibly different, and it's crossed over into the mental health world. They've invited Oklahoma Child Welfare Services into this, and these people have the power to take people's children away. It's really scary wedge between the family and other forces that would have them not be with their family.
Yeah.
We know Neanne said something. Hold on, I gotta go back up here and find it. Neanne said, has Elon started looking at states yet? I know on his X account he was asking for input from citizens, and she sent me a screenshot of that. So if somebody wanted to do that, they could, do that. But Neanne, what might be an interesting little trip through Data Republican would be a company called Nextera.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that might, if you've got time today and you want to just throw that in there, you can get their EIN and paste that in there, because I think what we're going to see is a bunch of these companies that have been milking the teat of government for their own jobs and whatever are going to be tied back to some of these NGOs that are pushing this, like the climate change stuff. I'm sure that's where some of that comes from.
Absolutely. And I encourage everyone to go out there to datarepublican.com. It takes about 10 minutes to figure out how to use these tools. She's given some very simple instructions, and you'll just have to sort of play with it. And if there's anything that you find that you think needs to be blasted out, you let us know. Our email is connect, CONNECT, at V1SUT.com, and we will do our best to get this out. But this is definitely not something that's just for journalists. This is every citizen should take some time. If you see something that doesn't seem right, that you can't believe has been funded by the community standards in your community, go look it up. It's worth a look.
So we need to look at a video. I'm going to pull that in so we have a chance to. I'm going to pull this out for a second but you have this up here right now, which is the segue into the video.
Do you want me to talk just a minute about this?
Bingo.
Okay. So we also put up, since last we met, an article about a bill that is going through the Oklahoma state legislature right now. It is a crazy cycle right now. They have deluged this legislature with hundreds of bills. I don't know if it's intentional for confusion, but it's very hard to keep up with. Well, two House members, Danny Sterling, who is the author of the bill, and now Dick Lowe, they are both former agriculture teachers, They are both former ed administrators under public funds. One was in tech and one was the high school principal out in Tecumseh. So they are working on a bill that would essentially undo some protections that were in House Bill 3958 last year. So Sherry Conley, when she was in the House, put House Bill 3958 through. It became law.
I call it the predator protection bill.
It's a great moniker. Thank you, Julia. So what it does is it prohibits teachers, coaches, school staff from one-on-one calling or texting or other digital communications with a student unless a parent or a guardian is involved. If you chase sexual abuse of students in Oklahoma public schools, they almost always involve texting, communicating one-on-one from adult to student as part of the grooming or part of the abuse. So when that went into effect just last fall, in fall of 2024, every single teacher, staff member in Oklahoma schools by law had to be trained about what you couldn't do anymore. You can't be texting with kids. Now, if you're a coach and you want to do a group text to all of the players and all of the parents together to make sure nobody misses the bus or we've changed time for practice, you can do that. They're not prohibited from doing that. You just have to include a parent. If you are a teacher and you want to make sure a whole class doesn't miss their final report, you can include parents as well. So there is no real inconvenience to educators in this. Somehow 7 months later, Danny Sterling and Dick Lowe have this bill up now. They're both on, let's talk about the committees. They're both on a whole bunch of education committees. And our legislature's education committees are full of education establishment people, ex-school administrators, ex-teachers. There is very little grassroots parenting representation where we make laws that affect our public schools. So these two gentlemen have proposed House Bill 1937, and it allows for an opt-out for parents to again allow coaches and teachers to privately communicate with their children. And while that sounds like it might be giving more control back to the parent, that no one has stopped to think about this, or at least say it publicly. If your kid is now on the high school basketball team for the first time, your daughter is on the high school basketball team, and Coach Joe says in the parent meeting, okay, I need to be able to communicate with these girls. We're going to make it to state. We're going to do this thing. You need to sign this opt-out, parent. Every one of those parents is going to sign that opt-out because they are going to be thinking it's required of the team. It may affect their ability to get playing time. There are all kinds of pressures on parents. If it's the ag teacher saying, yes, your kid has an animal in the barn, I have to be able to text with them privately because we need to talk about that animal, right?
Yeah, that was the lamest excuse, Mary, in my opinion, of that whole deal is that whole animal, there's an animal emergency. We may need to contact you. I mean, give me a break.
Right. And so the one Moms for Liberty chapter asked for clarification about this. And Danny Sterling basically said, ag teachers conversing with students about issues with the student's animal that might need immediate attention. That's fine. Communicate with the kid and the mother, the kid and the father, or the kid and the guardian, right? So he's saying that the bill is creating undue hardships on many in education. And he said it's a burden for the overwhelming number of educators who are truly dedicated to serving their students. They want to push the predator educators to the side and say, we don't need to change anything we're doing because there's people sexually abusing kids in school. That's a tough statement to handle.
We need to edit that statement just a little bit and say it's a burden to the sex predators to have another check and balance in this equation. That's a burden to them.
Yeah,
exactly. And when we start to really think about, what other ramifications of this law might be. So let's say you're a parent who is pressured to sign this for a sporting event or an AP class or something else of that nature. What if, God forbids, your child then ends up in an inappropriate relationship and being sexually abused by that teacher?
Yeah.
Did you just forfeit? Did the school just push the liability for that off on the parent because the parent signed an opt-out? I don't know the answer to this. Is this a solution for these big settlements that are happening in schools?
Ooh, that's a good point. That's an excellent point. Well, you signed it.
Correct. So for those of you interested in calling your legislators, it's House Bill 1937, and it needs to not pass if we're going to continue to protect students. We finally took a giant step forward last year, and now they want to take a giant step back. But Jenny, you have a video, and I'll let you set that up a bit. I think you.
I do, but I would like to know who did the video, because it's a freaking awesome. It's a freaking awesome video.
It is. I can tell you this, that the sting that happened involving the Yukon teacher involved in this next video was done by Oklahoma Predator Prevention. I have spoken with, interviewed them before. They are phenomenal warriors for the protection of children. If you want to support someone who's telling the truth and protecting kids, go to Oklahoma Predator Prevention and give them your help. They are fantastic.
Okay, give me a second. It's deciding to play Whoop-Dee with me this morning. Hold on. Hopefully it'll. Okay.
Representative.
Yes, thank you for recognizing me. I am just curious if you're aware of how many students have been sexually assaulted. Can you give me a number in the past year?
No, I have no idea how many. I know that there's a small percentage as compared to the number of students that are taken care of very responsibly by educators in our system.
So why are we talking to 15-year-old kids, Kevin?
Because I thought he was 16. I did. I thought he was 16.
Kevin, that's what
Why are
symbolizes
you doing this to me?
Uh-oh, police are here.
This bill is a good bill. It's a really common sense bill, in my opinion. We're, for lack of better words, cutting their nose off spotted face when by far the vast majority of educators are doing a fine job, and this is just an extra burden upon them because of some bad actors that are going to find a way around this or any other platform if they really want to be an offender or a predator.
Wow.
So to clarify, that was Danny Sterling, and those were his words as they were discussing the bill they're trying to put through, 1937, in committee, and he was taking questions. And I just want to repeat what he said. He says, this is just, and he's talking about Sherry Connolly's bill from last year that protects kids from one-on-one communication. This is just an extra burden upon them, meaning educators.
Stop.
Because
Stop. Rinse, repeat.
This is just an extra burden upon them. And then with them, he is referring to the adults in the equation, the educators. Because of some bad actors, he's talking about child sexual predators that are going to find a way around this or any other platform if they really want to be an offender or predator. What Mr. Sterling, the former high school principal, is telling us is that perpetrator's gonna perp. Nothing you can do about it. We can't be bothered to enter extra parent phone numbers into our group texts because that would be an extra burden.
Oh, I like this one. My friend Sandra says this. You know, I'm tired, y'all. I'm exhausted, and I don't. I'm getting to the point where, so this is public notice, just warning everybody. So when it happens, they call it the people's house, yet we're not really invited in. There are green coats that will tell us to sit down and shut up, and you can't have a piece of paper, and you can't do all of this. And yes, it's the people's house, but the people who are supposedly elected by the people get to sit down in this little well while you watch them do everything antithetical to freedom that they can possibly do in a day, and we can't say anything. Well, guess what? I think I'm going to stand up and go, "What are you doing?" Maybe that's what we should do. We should just all sit up in the gallery, watch these people and go, "Excuse me, Rep. Sterling, what are you doing?" Because they won't let us come to a committee meeting. We don't get to talk at a committee meeting because only experts get to talk at a committee meeting, these people who are down there, let's use Danny Sterling's terminology. The great majority of people who are down there are putting the screws to you and your kids and your freedom, and yet we're letting them get away with it.
So
don't forget the caucus meetings and the executive sessions.
Wait, Dorn had to tell me to stop being disrespectful.
So what I want to do is connect a few dots. If you'll go back to my screen about the why is this happening?
Hold on a second. Which screen are we going to?
There's an article. There's a picture of the legislature.
I'll bring it up.
Oh, got it.
You got it. Oh,
we were fighting over it.
So these same legislators are the ones who spent a good bulk of 2024 trying to interrupt the State Board of Education meetings. They were specifically trying to get into the executive session discussions. Now, there were a lot of attacks on the State Board of Education, but there was a real focus on getting in on the private conversations of executive session where privileged information was conveyed so that board members could make votes. The vast majority of what they talk about there is educator misconduct, teachers who have done things that they shouldn't, teachers who have hurt children. There's specific information about those children that has to be protected by the board. And these legislators, Osborne, John, Sterling, Lowe, Senator Pugh, Jacob Rosencrantz, Boren, Mark McBride at the time, they all...
Okay, wait, stop. How many of those are supposed to have an R after their name?
Well, there's a paragraph with all of them and their party affiliations, okay? Of that huge group, only Senator Pugh and Representative Osborne, both Republicans, are not coaches or educators. They're not from the education world. All the rest of them were a teacher, a coach, school administrator, something, public ed establishment, okay? So you have to start to think about the ed unions that are behind them, who is pushing this, right? They held up for months the suspensions or revocations of teachers who had perpetrated upon children. They grandstanded about it. There were talk about funding. It turned out to be it wasn't any of that. None of that was happening in executive session. Finally, these board members who people don't understand, the State Board of Education, they're volunteers. They're appointed by the government. They don't get paid to do this. And it's actually a lot of work to stay up with all of the information that they cover every month. They finally said, we can't have you in executive session. Nobody is willing to sign a non-disclosure agreement. We don't know that you're not going to use this for political capital. Go out to the media, spread the information of both the educators and the children involved. So they just distributed the information about these heinous cases from the lawyers in writing so that they could review them ahead of time. They didn't even have the opportunity to discuss with their counsel the different aspects of these cases. They had to do it all out in public and not say it out loud. So who are these legislators protecting is my question. The same ones are now saying educators need to have one-on-one contact with students without parents present.
Well, and why don't you make the point about Senator Pugh, which I've been hearing a rumor that he's going to run for superintendent of public instruction.
Goodness, that's funny.
I just hear that around, but wasn't he the sponsor of the bill to reduce the number of years that you could actually report sexual molestation from a public school official?
He was involved in the committee review. So if you go back to 2017, that's when they changed the statutes of limitation on child abuse, not just in schools, all child sexual abuse across the state. And it was both civil and criminal. And there were things that went through at that time. One of them was to extend the age that someone can come forward about child sexual abuse to 45. The mistake the legislature made, either intentionally or non-intentionally, is they didn't make it retroactive. So it had very little effect. DAs still will not, they're actually hesitant to prosecute any child sexual crimes now because they're not quite sure what the statutes are. They have to go by the law at the time that the abuse took place. It made it all just very confusing and did not help. The other portion of that was on the civil side. So it extended the statute of limitations in the same way for civil actions. But in one of the committee reviews where a good bill went in, Adam Pugh was involved, where then they added a 2-year restriction to be able to sue an institution. So a school, a group home under DHS, for knowingly allowing a predator to abuse children, sexually abuse children. So what that effectively means is kids only have 2 years, and that the latest that 2 years can go is it can start at the age of majority, which is 18. So before they turn 20, they must still be teenagers before they can come forward about child sexual abuse in schools in a civil capacity. So think about all of the suits and the settlements we've been hearing. Those are only when there was a child, a teenager, who was brave enough and supported enough to come forward during that time. Can you imagine the bulk of disclosures happen when people are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, after they've matured, after they've struggled through the trauma, and now they become people who are dead set on protecting children, and they come forward and they try to press criminal or civil charges. Can you imagine if our laws were really just to those people, how many suits we would solve the child sexual abuse epidemic in schools in 1 year if we would take the handcuffs off those victims and allow them to take care of the problem?
You know, and Julia makes another excellent point. Children don't come forward.
No.
They're the ones that think they've done something bad. So if you think a child is just going to come up and go, you know, this happened, it would be a very extraordinary child who would do that. Most of them are not going to do that. My God, that's why we taught our kids stranger danger, you know, for years, because a child is a child with a child's brain that doesn't understand what adults understand. And yet we keep treating them like they're adults by showing them porn, telling them it's okay, having a drag queens reading to kids in library. I mean, we keep doing all of these things, but they're not like that. I mean, it's right. They're traumatized by this. They're not coming forward, not until they're old enough to figure it out.
Yeah. And remember, just from Mary's articles alone, most of these kids are targeted. They're kids from broken families or have all kinds of issues, you know, whether it's a family issue, mental issue, some type of, you know, whatever. I mean, and just like in, who was it, Mary, that was it Casey or who was it that didn't even remember until, you know, 20 years later, it snapped back into his brain.
Absolutely.
That it even happened.
Yep, that was Casey Yoakum in the Wetumpka case that now, after a year and a half of hammering on this, Brent McGee has been charged, and there's civil action going as well against the school because his wife was the superintendent. But yes, in interviewing Casey, he was 45 years old, and he was actually sitting somewhere on a date. He was on a date, and the woman asked him, "I don't know anything about you. Tell me something that nobody else knows." And he said, "It just came over me." And I said, "Yeah, I was molested by my soccer coach." And he said it started a tumult in his life that then led to counseling and processing. The brain is a very protective thing in children. So a lot of the victims that I've talked to when it comes to in school predators, they are very good at creating that trauma bond with the child. And adolescence is a very confusing sexual time. So these kids aren't able to identify it as abuse and the misuse of power until much later. Many of them have told me that their abuser kept contacting them through the college kind of years, kind of checking in like that caring uncle who wants to know what's going on in your life. So when you think about that, and they cover their tracks for years, making the statute of limitations where you have to be 19 or younger is you have to start to question, was Pew and were other legislators doing the bidding of the unions and people who talk like Danny Sterling, who say, we don't want to be inconvenienced. And anytime you point out child sex abuse in schools, it's an insult to every educator. No, it's not.
No, the good ones want them out. The good ones want them out. No, it's not an insult. It's an insult to the educators who don't care or are doing it. And Julia makes another point that's excellent that we need to take a few seconds to talk about. Yoakum said that his mother would have signed the opt-out if the coach had asked, because we've talked about that 100 times. You know, the parents are like, oh, well, we just love our coach. He's great. You know, they work the kids, blah, blah, blah. They're not, I don't know what it is about sports. We've talked about it 100 times, and I've actually not just talked about it. I've railed and screamed about it on this program. Sports are stupid. They need to be removed from public schools, period. End of discussion. End of discussion. There should be no sports in public schools. That should be completely separate. You do it on your own time, period. I'm not even going to argue the point because it's stupid what it does and what it does. But the point of the matter is, you've got all these parents, and this would happen even, you know, if it happens outside the public school with people who do use private sports associations. It happens the same way. Parents are very keyed in on making their kids' dreams come true. I want to play basketball for the whatever, right? So they just want to make their kids happy. They just want to make this happen for their kids. And if their coach is helping them get there, the parent is all for the coach. It all makes sense. There's nothing about it that doesn't make sense. But the problem is we haven't taught parents how to be cynical and to question. We don't do that. The coach is an authority figure. The teacher is an authority figure. A representative or a senator is an authority figure. We think we have all these authority figures. We have no authority but Jesus. That is the only authority we have. Everybody else is on our level or lower. And we've got to start remembering this, because that's how all this crap happens, because we keep deferring to people. Oh, well, he's the coach. He knows better. Put on your cynical glasses, put them on, cinch them on, and pay attention to what's going on. Always have this little play going in your head. Well, I don't know. That sounds funny. Well, what's going on? We're just not cynical enough, and we kowtow to these people that we put up on pedestals that we believe have some kind of authority over us.
Well, and think about this, Jenny. If all those sports, and we'll just say all those organizations, you know, any of that extracurricular that's not academic in one way or another, if it was all private and you've got a coach now that's engaged in this, what's he lose? He loses the district money, the district lawyers, you know, all that major district backing, the backing from the town, the police officers, that whole 9 yards, all of it.
Correct.
I gave you high fives and all, because that's an excellent point, Michael. Excellent, excellent point. You're exactly right. That is probably the main reason why we need to get sports out from under public schools, because all the public schools do then is protect the predators instead of worrying about the kids. And if it were outside of school, just exactly like you said, it would all come out of their pocketbook. They wouldn't have the taxpayer subsidized attorneys that show up in a big line to say, no parent.
Yeah, you'd literally have one instance, one guy would go to jail, and no other coach would ever do that because of how severe the punishment on a private coach would be. And I'm not picking on coaches or, you know, but that's just the subject here. You send one guy to jail, make them responsible, and they could come back after the fact because it's out of the school system kind of deal. That would be game over.
Well, and I want to point out, Sandra says here, seeing a consistent theme here, protecting industries have been negligent from all liability, whether it's Monsanto, Bayer, human manure, child predators in schools. That's the biggest problem that we have in Oklahoma. And that's how we know that this state is corrupt. It's just corrupt through and through, because we would have these people being called out. They would be gotten. They would be pulled off of the street. They would have been dealt with by a DA. Where are DAs in this? Are DAs doing anything about this? They're not charging these things. Mary, you've said over and over again, well, the DA wouldn't charge, or the DA came out and didn't do this. We have a huge problem with corruption in this state, and it starts with our law enforcement people. It starts with our law enforcement people. How do you get around that when the legislators, the DAs, even some of the police officers are just turning a blind eye to this because they don't want to get involved and it's not their issue, or they don't think they can prosecute or whatever. And this, I mean, Roberta says the same thing. She had another good comment up there a minute ago. DAs are not enforcing this. There is no law enforcement on this. And people and judges, Julie's right. The judges aren't doing, I mean, we talked about Robert Keyes's suit where the judge there, Jeff Virgin, just went, oh, well, I don't, nothing to see here with all this evidence. Just move on down the line. I mean, you've heard the girls from Pike Off OTA talk about the fact that their attorney goes to court and then the judge just goes, you can't do this, smacks them on the hand, and then never follows up about actually making them do it. Our justice system in Oklahoma is not going to use the term, but was close.
Yeah. How about that article I sent you from the Panhandle where they were running those traffic scams on those truckers and the DA was taking the money off the books?
But it's true. I mean, I was going to pull that up today. I'm so sorry, Michael. I was going to pull that up today and show that because it's another really, and then but Bryce was escorted out of the school board meeting for reading scripture. Yeah. It's so upside down, but the parents won't. I don't know if it's they're not in. So many of them are not interested. I mean, I went to school. I went to, I mean, this is sad, peeps. Went to a luncheon the other day and sat down next to a person who was a teacher in public schools in central Oklahoma. And basically he was like, you know what? I don't know what to do because the parents drop the kids off and really all they end up doing is going out and get their nails done and, lunching with their friends. And we're just a babysitter. And that's true because anytime you call home and say, this is a problem, they're, well, I haven't finished my hair appointment.
Well, I mean, not to, I don't like to hammer parents, but we live.
I'm sorry, Michael. You know what? I will hammer parents because not so many of the parents are the problem.
All right. Well, you didn't let me finish. I was going to say, not that I want to just blame everything on them, but at some point we live in a completely decadent society. You have to put some of your own, personal wants and gotta haves to the side to make sure, we take care of ourselves. But we're just so inundated with entertainment, social, all this, but I want to touch on this, when we get ready to close out, because I'm a macro guy. I like to look at the biggest picture possible. And I want to go back into that eugenics a little bit. But, we've been under, in my opinion, a chemical assault for a long, long time. Like all these people that are LGBT, messed up, the whole autism deal, we've been under a massive assault chemically, whether it's through the food, whether it's through all these vaccines. There's so much medication. Everyone is so medicated. I mean, we're electrochemical beings that, our society. And on top of that, Jenny, you got to think about, for the first time really ever in the last, I'd say maybe 10 years, look at how we're just completely inundated with electromagnetic, signals across the board from all the TV, satellites, cell phones, Wi-Fi, radar. You can't go anywhere without having 1,000 different, electromagnetic streams going through you in one way or another. It's all coalesced in one way or another, in my opinion, to destroy the family unit. And I'll show you some things on that here before we close.
Well, let me catch up on some comments here, which are super, super important. And I don't ever care if we go over. So Casey says this: I had a trauma bond with Brent McGee until 45 years old. I was nominated for an award and I spoke about my time in Noble and I spoke highly of McGee and I didn't understand why. And then a month later is when it flew out of my mouth. Scary. For years, the ODE and I only had one attorney working every case in Oklahoma. The teachers union protect the teachers and not the students. And you know, it's funny that you say that, Casey, and I'm going to flip this over to another thing, but it's parallel. I remember when I first started going to town meetings in my town, and you knew that the board members were doing shady stuff, and everybody in the town was like, this is crazy. Everybody knew it, right? So I went to the attorney for the town and I said, what's going on here? I mean, you know, this isn't even reported on the agenda. I just started doing what I normally do, which is vomiting up information. And he said, well, I don't work for the people in the town. I work for the board members. And it was then that I went, then I'm going to become a board member. And by God, I did. And that's how we kind of started turning we turned the town around, because there were 4 other people that got elected too who had the same idea. And we all just moved that Titanic around and turned it into a different direction. But that's what we had to do to make these things stop, because literally the teachers unions, the attorneys that work for the schools, all of these people, they're there for the school. They don't give a rat's butt about the parents or the kids. That's not their issue. Oh, and then the next one we need to talk about is this. Amber says, I'm from Eugene, Oregon, and there are from K to 6th, sports are organized by an outside, from K to 6th grade, sports are organized by an outside organization called Kids Sports. It's been around 40 plus years. It's a win for homeschool kids too. I played soccer through 4th and 6th grade. Our son played soccer, t-ball, and basketball through them. They run it way better than the schools do. And that's a really excellent point. I mean, okay, I'm taking a breath. So anybody else who wants to,
Well, I will say, we've talked about so many things today, non-transparency with funds. Then we talked about where our legislators are being very non-transparent about their objectives, and they're trying to undo the things that people fought very hard for to protect kids. And I'm not going to go into depth about this article. This is another one that's come out since last we met. But there's something going on in Moss schools. There's reports of a group sexual assault, sexual assault of kinds. Since it published, many, many more people are coming forward to me. So I'm not going to go too much into it. But one point I want to make about all this, we're saying, how can this happen in schools? How can they still be fighting to cover this up? How can they not protect children? Well, this school district is an interesting case. If you want to read the article, we'll have more to come. In 2018, our brilliant state legislature passed either an amendment or a bill by itself that allowed school districts, small school districts with less than 400 students, to basically throw the rules about conflicts of interest out the window. So if you have less than 400 kids in your district, you can have a board member who is married to the superintendent. You can have direct relatives. You can have hiring of your own children into these positions. So there's the checks and balances of school administration and local school board elected by the people and the parents vanishes. And what we're seeing in Moss schools is that that direct nepotism that was able to grow, they have less than 300 students in the district, has caused a culture that is now breeding this kind of attack. So the superintendent of this district grew up professionally underneath Donna McGee, who was the
Wow.
McGee.
Wow.
15 years there, because they're just right down the road. Well, country right down the road, right? Rural right down the road. As a teacher, counselor, principal under Donna McGee during all the time that we now know that those involved in the criminal and civil cases against Brett McGee were being molested by her husband. And I say that out loud, not reportedly, because we have a recording of him admitting to the abuse to Casey Oakham, who's on here, so he can verify that, right? We've posted the recording in our publications. So this woman at Moss grew up under the culture at Wetumpka, and now she's moved down into an even smaller school where We have a board member who is the cousin of the high school principal. We have direct conflicts like that. We have her own relatives working throughout the school. And as a journalist, trying to get the information about what happened or any statement is impossible. The school doesn't think that it owes you as the taxpayer any public records. The same sheriff's department that was involved in the Wetumpka case, different sheriff now, same culture, would not fulfill an open records request about the incident report when they went out to the school to investigate this. Even with the request saying, we understand minors' names and identifying information will be retracted. That's fine. We want to know what went on here. And outside of the law, they're withholding that. The DA, after this article came out, put out something that said, we kind of think there's nothing to see here. Everyone turn around, go away. Put out a public statement. So this is what we're dealing with when we have someone like Danny Sterling or Dick Lowe telling us that we can't pester them to protect kids.
By the way, let me throw in something that you'll really enjoy. So Neanne, one of my favorite people in the world, she sent me this. She texted me this, and I just thought you guys might like to know this. Oh, hold on a second. Casey says 100% recorded twice, one with my own personal recording and FBI recording with audio and video. So he's just,
Correct.
Yeah. So Dick Lowe, now I'm not sure. This is the Freedom Index. Okay. So this is a grade by the Freedom Index. So Dick Lowe, do you want to know what Dick Lowe's score is for the Freedom Index?
Sure.
He flunked. It's a 47.
A 47.
Yeah. Chuck Hall has a 57. Grant Green has a 33. He's my senator. Has a 33%.
I believe, if I'm correct here, that Grant Green the one who, yes, he's the one who picked up this House Bill 1937 to give an opt-out and allow coaches and teachers to communicate privately with students.
Dorn, I hope you've got this. Is at 13706 on the video.
It is Senator Grant Green. Since it's moving out of committee, he is carrying it in the Senate.
There we go. The man with a 33% on the Freedom Index. Please don't tell me. I can't. Mary, is this a red state?
The people of this state are largely homogenous in their beliefs.
I would agree.
The government of this state is highly corrupt and duplicitous.
Yep. Oh, and Amber's backing you up too. She said, in my experience, the school district will always pick to protect the educator over the child. They see the parent and the child as a threat when we parents try and hold them accountable. Even when we're going to ask them for help, they automatically go on the defensive and make you public enemy number one. That was our experience anyway.
Well, Amber is going to love this. When Visit asked for comment from both Representatives Danny Sterling and Representative Dick Lowe. We asked about different aspects of the bill that they may not have considered. And then the other thing that we asked is, during your time as a school administrator, did you ever allow someone accused of misconduct with a student to resign? And neither one of them answered our request for comment. When you start to think about why so many school administrators are running the teachers' unions, the school board union, the school administrators union, and are on our education committees, we're looking at people who may have practiced passing the trash by allowing predators to resign rather than getting them fired or reported. And I will tell you,
and banned forever from teaching.
Yes. And that's been a long-standing policy. I'm not saying either one of these men made that up or personally participated in that, but I thought the question was worth asking, because that is an area where I've talked to elected local school board members from districts in Oklahoma who say that's how they were advised when they were trained by the OSSBA, or they called for legal advice from the OSSBA. That once somebody resigns, you don't investigate, it's not your problem. You have no legal authority to do anything. So I start to wonder if what the motivation is to start to cover these things up is that if we ever pull the thread about how many people actually did this, that it would be all of them.
Yeah.
So Dr. Pelham asks, she said, I've noticed the OSDE website has a large banner with a link encouraging reporting of all school abuses. Do you feel the OSDE is finally listening to these horrible things happening in our schools, or is it a political response to the bills that are being proposed?
Based on actions, and if you go back and you look at all of the Oklahoma State Board of Education, the Board of Education makes the decisions. Ryan Walters runs the OSDE, but he sits as the chair on the Oklahoma Board of Education, just so you understand. And if you look at all of the minutes, and particularly go look at their legal section, they have suspended or revoked an absolute record number of teacher certificates. They have caused a tornado of backlash from the education establishment.
Why do you think 3 of the good members are gone now?
Yeah. Well, and I can attest.
Oh, go ahead. We'll have a little bit more on that. I'm going to let Michael comment on that.
Well, I can attest. I've turned in multiple reports myself, either from me or on behalf of someone else, and all of them have been investigated in one way or another, and there has been outcomes in every one of those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. I think that this administration is the first one I've seen that is very serious about protecting children and taking on the establishment. They actually have a team of investigators now. During the previous administration under Joy Hoffmeister, for much of her 8 years, they didn't even have one person assigned to look at these reports from parents or students about abuse. Huge improvement.
So what were you going to say, Michael?
On this?
Yeah, I thought you were going to say something.
No, I was just gonna say I know that these things have been investigated.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's encouraging. That's encouraging.
I want to point out a couple of things. I'm getting inundated with text messages here. Hold on, but I want to point out something. So we have 3/4 of our viewers are on X right now. And I'm glad for all of the people on X. I mean, that makes me happy. And thank you guys so much for tuning in to X. But you can't comment on X. Or at least I've not seen somebody comment on X. If somebody's watching on X, I'd love to see if you can actually comment and it picks it up in the threads. But I wonder how many people in quote unquote high places are actually watching on X, where it's kind of a little undercover.
It's more anonymous. It's more anonymous. We can't actually see, who's on there. So there's a reason for that. And if there are people out there, Gene, I think we need to say, hey, the tides are turning. We're going to keep exposing these people as we go, because obviously they need to be exposed in one way or another. All these rhinos, all these bad guys, all these guys that are against the people that say they're Republican or they're Christian or conservative or whatever, the time's ticking now. This isn't 10 years ago where you could get away with all this stuff. Things are changing, and I hope we can eliminate or expose every single one of these people for, the fake representatives that they are.
And in an effort to, make this not as much of an attack. I just always want to say, because I focus in this area, how much I appreciate amazing educators. And we've had so many whistleblower educators who have brought us information where they can't speak within their own districts because they will lose their job if they tell about these things. But to any school administrator who maybe has been forced by these policies to do things they weren't comfortable with, I would love to do an interview with someone who would tell me about that. What is it like? What do they tell you have to do? What do they say the law is about these things? What are you told to do as far as reporting? If anyone would ever want to talk to me about that, I feel like education's never going to be cleaned up until there's a collaboration between the people running it, inside it, and the populace. So if you ever reach out to me, everything I write has an email on it. I would love both sides of the conversation, but over and over again, legislators, educators, administrators do not respond with any information about these stories. It's very hard to tell the whole story when you will not engage.
Well, and I want to point out a couple of things because we've got a couple of good comments here, and I want to go to Dr. Pelham's. She said, that's encouraging. I feel your reporting has been well done, and it's nice to see that your work and the brave individuals whose stories you've shared are being heard. The developments happening with the board have been concerning, but I hope they do due diligence for the issues that impact our kids. And I want to point this out because this was my experience too. In my experience, the good teachers are harassed out the door or fired, and the parents and students are retaliated against when reporting. And I want to jump off of her comment, and then we need to go back to one I'm starting with.
I want to make comment on that too.
Good.
Jenny, after you.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to make the point that I remember, and I believe it was 2015. Julie will have to help me with that. When the teachers first started going to the Capitol protesting, and they wanted their raises, and it had just become this big thing. And I said something. I made some comment on our Rope Facebook page, which has been up since 2011 or some 2010. You can go back through probably and even find it, search it and find it. I made some comment about how that teachers who wanted more, who were involved in this, are not the teachers who are staying back in their classrooms, who are actually teaching. Those are the ones that deserve the raises, not the ones that are going to the Capitol. I got hammered. These teachers just pounded me for, how dare you say that, blah, 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 blah. People, the good teachers, and there are a few left, but there are a few teachers that are good left. And those teachers that are good, honestly, I'm suggesting you leave. You guys leave, come together, start your own schools, create schools outside the public sphere, and do what so many people are actually doing in creating little micro schools or whatever. Because you need to get out from under the state. You need to get out from under accreditation garbage. You need to get out from under these stupid laws. Like, by the way, I'm standing up here as your governor, and I'm telling you to sign a bill to prevent cell phones use in schools. But I'm also going to laud my friend who's from Jinx, who created a program like that all by himself. All of this nonsense needs to be stopped. The only way to do it is to get out from government in any way, shape, or form and start your own school, educate your own kids. I don't know what it's going to take for people to understand this, but parents who only want babysitters are going to use schools for forever. I mean, they really will. This is what these schools are for. People can get mad about it and scream and yell and do whatever. But if you can't see our proficiency levels are in the toilet, our NAEP scores are in the toilet, that doesn't have anything to do with the legislature. It has everything to do with the local school board and what kind of programs that they want the children to have. I can't tell you how many times I've had school board people contact me and say, where's that state law that says school board members do everything? And I was like, okay, hold on 1 second, I'll give it to you. And then I had one person who's running for school board who was like, well, where's the statute that says that we can do everything? And I gave it to her, and she said, well, but it says all these things. It doesn't say that specifically. And I'm like, because it says all those things. I mean, I don't know what to say. I just can't even. And then you've got Kaylia, who says, yes, Kelly, good teachers are bullied out. And that's a fact too. I know that for an absolute fact. They will just make you feel like garbage. You go into use the copy machine, and they're just like, I mean, trust me, teachers are the biggest bullies of them all. And they will bully you right out of the whole system.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, you know,
okay, go ahead now.
When I ran for school board, we kind of had an anonymous tip line kind of deal set up. And I can't tell you how many teachers, you know, would contact me through that and say, hey, there are good teachers here. We're for you. You know, when you get in, you need to look at this and this. I'd get letters, handwritten letters in the mail, you know, with no return address, no nothing, that said, when you win, you need to do this. You need to look at this. This is what's happening. I can't support you. I can't say anything. I mean, so there was a ton of good teachers just like that. They literally text me on like their lunch break and say, keep going. You're going to have to do this. You're going to have to do that. So I was happy to see that. And I'll tell you what, there's a ton of teachers also that said, you know, if you don't win, not because of me, but just they knew that I was going to have a lot more scrutiny when it comes to the board and the activities in administration, things like that. They literally said, you know, I'm going to quit within the next year. If, you know, I'm going to retire, I'm going to figure out how to get out of here. I mean, it's so sad that we've come down, but I'll tell you, those teachers did admit to me that they are so pressured. There's so much pressure on them to go along with whatever, you know, the herd over there is saying. I mean, it's scary. I hate that for those teachers.
Well, and then you got to go back to what Wendy said, and we all know this. We all know this, but I mean, what are we going to do about it except scream about it all the time? Why on earth have these predators passed from district to district? Oklahomans need to ask these questions and not stop. There's no reason for this other than pressure from an outside source. It's unconscionable. I know the people of Oklahoma are better than this. I'd mentioned the stolen school board elections where the policies are made, but no, I'll mention it. Stolen elections are key to fixing these problems. Thank you, Visit, for the reporting on those issues. Yeah. It's infuriating. And I know our comment was larger, but it only takes so many. But that's the point. I mean, we saw that in your election. I just still to this day, Michael, believe that election was stolen. Rhonda Peterson's, I believe that election was stolen.
I mean, it's so crazy when you look at and I'm not saying this is how it was, because we couldn't afford to do all the go down there and go through all the absentee ballots, because it would have cost me like $15,000 or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
To do that. Then if we couldn't find something, then the state can come back and sue me for damages for even asking questions. But just to lay it out, like in my race, magically in the runoff, there's 365 absentee ballots cast against me, which was more than if you take all the other candidates and all the other races combined. That's more than any other candidate even received. I mean, it's unbelievable. And we finally, 2 years later, we got that absentee list. You can't even believe some of these addresses and some of these places, there was like 50 something ballots going all over the world. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, in just other places outside of Edmond, I mean, it's so crazy. It's so crazy.
Well, to back you up, people need to go to the last thing I posted, the website about Robert Keyes, and look at that. There were 8 letters that he sent out from his campaign to addresses that came back no such name, no such address. And yet those exact 8 people voted in that election.
Yeah. And the other 55 votes that were on the roll that are the more votes that were counted than were even on the roll.
Yeah, and Wendy says you probably won your race, and she's got the data where an investigation should have happened. And his opponent didn't likely know either, and I would agree with that. I don't think your opponent knew. Something else is going on. I just can't figure out what it is. And Gracie said, I think we'd all be shocked at how many local elections are bogus. But the problem is, Gracie, we're having the problem of not being able to solve that problem. I had to get my own attorney. Robert Keyes had to get his own attorney. We're having to sue people, and then like Robert Keyes, the justice system won't even fix the problem. They won't even rule on it. It's like it's
well,
what can you do when you do the right thing and yet the system gives you the middle finger?
Yeah. Well, let me give you another example, Jenny. So after my race, I went down to the election board office. I just wanted a copy of all the absentee voters, that filed for absentee ballots in my district so we could go canvass all those addresses. You know what they gave me? They literally gave me a 700-page file that was non-searchable. You couldn't even put it into, some type of converter to get it into Excel to even sort it. It was a complete joke. There's no way you could possibly do anything with that. And they do it on purpose. They do it on purpose. So we can't go check.
Yeah. No, that's got to be it, because I remember when I asked them for when I was running for town board, and they gave me a CD, you had to go down and pick it up, and it was a PDF file. And you're like, not sure how I'm going to be able to do anything with this. And I told you this story before, out here when we sent out letters about just notifying people that there was going to be a tax increase in the town, just to let them know, not to say anything about the tax, but just to let them know there was going to be a vote, to be transparent. 112, not kidding, 112 of the envelopes that we sent out came back as being not deliverable. You don't think that'd flip an election?
Wow. Well, yeah, especially in these locals where it literally comes down to 5 or 10 votes.
To 4 people who voted. Precisely. All right. Well, let's close out here because we're already going on to 2 hours, even though we've got a great audience today. You are a superstar, Mary. Everybody loves you because you're just doing the work that people will not do.
Ditto. Thank you, Rope, you've put out some really amazing things lately. Encourage people to go to the Rope Report and see what they've been working on. And we'll have much more. We're going to talk very soon. We'll have some things coming out talking about changes on the state board. And we also have some things in the Oklahoma health field that I think Michael will be interested in. Everyone go to datarepublican.com. Do some searching on your own. If you find anything great, tag us. We'd love to know.
And go to thefreedomindex.org and look up the freedom index of your representative that's got an R by it.
We should the anti-freedom index.
Hey, we need to reclassify those R's as just really. That's what it needs to be. The R is just really with quotations. Really? You're voting what? Really? Okay.
I just love that. Well, hold on though. Sarah just put in a comment, and just wait until August when the state Medicaid expansion kicks in across all public school districts. OSDE and OHCA promoting federal funding is free money for mental health and healthcare services for all students eligible for Medicaid. No IEP needed. And oh gosh, Sarah, we may have to have you on to talk about that, because that is bad. And Casey says, you're all amazing. Continue to do God's work. Love you all. We're back at you, Casey. I mean, if it weren't for you, we wouldn't even have a show on this topic. So thank you for your bravery and reaching out to Mary and warning other parents who will allow themselves to be warned, I should say.
Yeah. Well, and I'd like to, if we hit that with what Sarah was talking about with IEPs and stuff, I met several parents, and this blew me away, Jenny, and you probably know this, but I guess a lot of these kids that have some type of, handicap or whatever it may be, the school is actually supposed to take care of them for a certain amount of years. Like, I don't know if it's like 20 or 21 or something like that.
22, Mary?
Yeah, 22. Yeah. And these schools literally, like I talked to some of these parents, the schools literally do whatever they can do to get these kids out.
Yes.
I mean, they literally just kick them out.
Yeah.
Yep. Special needs kids can stay until their 22nd birthday. And it's a huge thing. A lot of times it is their social, it is their interaction with the world. And then once they leave, a lot of times a parent has to quit work to be home with them at 22. So that's an extension of services that I very much support.
Well, unless we're going to do something else, and I would prefer we do something else because, back in the day, our Colquad, I'm going to call him Colquad, says you'd need less mental health if parents didn't need to work 50 hours a week. And I'm going to challenge that, because I always challenge our thinking, because I think we need to be challenged at this point in time. So I've been watching, we just finished last night watching Taylor Sheridan's 1883. But the whole point in me even bringing that up is these people came through Texas, up the Oregon Trail into Oregon and northward. And this show really did a great job of showing what pioneers went through to actually build this country. So this morning, it's 1 now where I am. According to my thermometer, it's 1. And I had to go out to take care of sheep. And as I was complaining about it, David said, and so what do you think this would be like in a wagon train?
Yeah.
But we're laughing about that. But we've come from being tough little people who could do that kind of thing to people who are going to cry and complain because government won't fill in the blank for me. So we've gone to, I'll take care of myself, heck with you, to government. What can you give me? I need to have government. That's the biggest problem that we have. Like I said, school sports should be outside things. All of these healthcare services should be outside things. That's where they all were originally. It's the growth of government that has pushed all of these things into public schools that is creating the Frankenstein that we have now, which is the, I can't do anything for myself. Give me government. And then the other problem that we have is that we have government inside our pockets constantly, fee, service. I posted something to my Facebook page the other day, which I'm sure pissed off tons of Republicans. It was a bill from Joanna Dossett, who is a Democrat, that was actually lowering government. And it was funny because our friend Sandy Harrell commented to it. And I'll tell you what she said in a second, because it was funny. But it was to stop charging microbreweries $3,500 a year in a fee and knock that down to $320. And Sandy Harrell said, show me that I have a friend that has, or I'll show you that I have a friend who's in microbrewing by not telling you that I have a friend in microbrewing. But that wasn't even the point. The point is there's a Democrat out there who's trying to knock off the fees, and where are Republicans doing that?
Really?
Jay Stiegel's trying to get rid of the income tax, and he is fighting his own Republicans tooth and nail. And you know what'll happen? Even if they do stop the income tax, they're just going to jack the fees up, because every time they have to raise a tax, they have to get a super majority of the legislature. And man, did they figure out a runaround around that. So what they do, instead of raising the taxes, they go, what if we call it a fee? So it doesn't matter. I mean, I kind of see Kilquad's point in that if they didn't have to work, but the other problem that we have is I have to have 2 brand new cars. I have to have a $650,000 home. I have to. Back in the day, you literally had a 1-room shack and you worked for yourself. We can do these things, but the problem is our society tells us that we can't do that because we need. And if we can't do it, it must be the government's problem.
Well, that's why they call us consumers, Jenny. All we do is consume, whether it's media or whatever. I mean, ultimately.
And then Amber said, because it's not about political party, it's the swamp. And that's exactly right. And so many comments have come in since I had to start on the, Lisa said, in a long skirt. And that is absolutely correct. In a long skirt with 7 pairs of underwear on. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that I think we've lost our focus. We forget what freedom is. We don't even know what freedom is. We think freedom is that we get to go to a basketball game. oh, thunder. I mean, that's what people think freedom is. Freedom is not having to kowtow together to do one dadgum thing. That's freedom. I don't want to pay you for my car, as Julia just said. I don't want to pay you to drive my truck. I don't want to pay you for jack squat. I want to pay you to keep my roads up. And then I want you to get out of my way and let me do everything else myself and let me create a business that's going to help kids with autism or be able to, provide a reading program for kids with dyslexia. These are all things that should be done outside of a public school.
Yeah, but it's like I always said, that's the greatest threat to the government is us. We're the greatest competition to the government. They do not want us to be independent, to be, to be self-reliant in any way. I mean, it's
and they talk us out of that all the time. Okay, my gosh, now we're over to 5. Well, and Julie had to stab me there. I want to pay someone else to keep the roads up. Have you seen them lately? Because that's a fact. I mean, we're supposed to, one of the functions of actual legitimate government is supposed to be keeping the roads up, and they can't even do that. Yeah, but they can queer our kids at school. So,
if we're too busy destroying the family unit, I mean, if the government is so busy destroying the family unit, then they create dependence across the board because now you have complete victims. You have victim mentality across the board. You've got a million different reasons why people can't do things. So you have to depend on the government. It's all part of the plan in one way or another. And I was going to go into that, but we're already at 2:06, so we'll save that for another show. But,
I don't know. People are hanging in there with us, and we keep getting more. We keep getting more viewers on Rumble.
It's just more from those days of eugenics into all these foundations like the Rockefeller, Carnegie foundations. All these things now they've morphed into the NGOs, but it's still the same. It's still the same outcome. They want to create the dependent factor. They don't want people being independent family units because then you don't need all that government.
Amber doesn't want us to go anyway. Julia says, "I'm not leaving." We're all
hey, I want to just show one thing real quick.
Okay, show it.
When you go back to, because the first time I heard about all the eugenic stuff, it just literally blew my mind, and I started going into it so much because I was just like, this can't be true here. So I want to go. Let me get this here. All right. Have you ever heard of this guy, Madison Grant, with the passing of the Great Race? Okay, so this was just a New York socialite. This guy wasn't, a scientist or anything like that, or anything of whatever. He was just one of these super rich, New York City guys. Anyway, he wrote this book all about all these immigrants coming in and how, the white Nordic race was was the superior race of the world, and it all goes into eugenics and all this kind of stuff. Anyway. The reason why I wanted to show that is when you look at our boy, Adolf Hitler, when he was in jail, he literally said, he wrote a letter to this guy, Grant, thanking him for writing that book. And he referred to that book as his Bible. He literally based Mein Kampf and all those things off of that. And Hitler, wrote to Margaret Sanger, recognized her also for, the entire Planned Parenthood, abortion, just race control type of stuff that was going on. I mean, it's literally insane. But this stuff, the roots of this go back so far. It's just crazy. But it's just like that social engineering that Mary was talking about. It's just eugenics repackaged. I mean, it literally is. They change the names. It's saying, they throw in all this buzz stuff, and it's literally just control in one way or another.
Correct. It's social engineering now. Instead of through race, it's through sexuality.
Yeah.
Oh, bingo.
Yeah.
Mic drop. I mean, for sure. I mean, I hadn't even thought about that until you said that. That really kind of, wow. Ew.
Well,
ew.
And on top of that, I mean, this is my kind of macro level of that whole deal. you know, as a father, how would you hurt me as a father? You know, whatever you say to me is not going to affect me. Whatever you do is not really going to affect me. But you hurt my kids, that's going to hurt me. So at the macro level, we're all children of God. So we live in a polar world. You know, I think most Christians have that cognitive dissonance that just because they can't conceive of killing or hurting someone doesn't mean, you know, it doesn't happen. It does. You know, how would evil hurt God? How would evil hurt God? It would hurt us, the children, you know, hurt us through sexuality, hurt us through all this stuff, breaking up the family. I mean, that's how, in my opinion, you hurt God, is you hurt his children, which is us right now being hurt by evil through all of this craziness.
Well, and Lisa made a really good comment. She's talking about moving here from California, but that there are actually more conservatives in California than you think you are. So kind of wrapping up, Lisa, I would say what we know from the USAID funds is the funds were speaking louder than the populace who was conservative. I don't think necessarily that there was some onslaught of really progressive people here in Oklahoma who wanted this agenda pushed and pushed into our schools. I think the money was there. It was the megaphone for the few.
Yeah. Harold says, I love it. Fellow Okies as angry and pissed off as I am. Well, you got plenty of that here. I am full of righteous indignation, Harold. So stick
well, it just comes back to, Jenny, if we don't do something, we the people, we the Oklahomans, you know, if we don't do something, these guys are out of control. They're all out of control. If we don't do it, no one else is going to do it. Trump's not going to come in here and save our school board.
No.
You know, we have to do that.
Well, but I think it begins with us calling people out, because if we don't call people out and make people understand what's happening, then we can't get them in on the fight too. And when we have to have a bigger army than we have right now. So that has to be our part of our focus.
Yep.
I'm sorry, Mary.
Yep. The things that you can do is to call your state house member and state senator and say absolutely no to House Bill 1937. You don't need to talk to my child unless I'm involved, educators. Also, take some time in datarepublican.com and take a look. Follow your instincts. Now you're able to see some money and mapping with your instincts. And then we'll be back with much, much more. There's always tons to cover here. Thank you both for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, and thank you for being with us again, Mary. And we'll see you again. Well, you're up next month.
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll see you again next month, and we'll talk to you before that, I'm sure.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening. Bye.
All right, bye. I think we actually timed her out.
Yeah. Mary is literally the best. I mean, the work she's doing, who else, you know, Jenny, besides like you and maybe one or two other people in this state is doing anything to that level.
Well, I do want to point something out that I thought it's not funny, but it's ironic. So Paycom literally put out their first quarter earnings, and they were up by 15%. And I went, after getting millions and millions and millions of dollars from Oklahoma taxpayers, how did that happen? There you go.
There you go.
And yeah, she is amazing. Did you want to throw the debt clock in there and hammer on that for the next 2 minutes, and then we can at least limp it along to 2:15?
Well, you know, my favorite little piece of information here, the United States debt clock. You know, I've gotten some emails about the derivative side, you know, because people just don't understand that. And we were talking, and this kind of goes back to that gold issue. You know, the gold, you know, is not in Fort Knox. But when you look at the actual trading of gold, there's so many massive trades on. I mean, there's more gold trades in a single day, you know, than there's even gold coming out of the ground for a year.
Yeah.
So when you look at all this banking and how intense all this stuff is, you know, they're always concentrating on this number right here, the $36 trillion.
Right.
You know, what's more important is, you know, our total debt, which this includes portions of the unfunded, which is 100 trillion. That's 100 trillion. That's and that's not even counting the Social Security, Medicare, which is over 200, you know, something trillion. But the real deal is this number down here, this $700 trillion. I mean, it's so hard. And that's not even global. Okay. when you take in global, when you're talking global derivatives and just all this craziness, I mean, you're talking quadrillions, like $3 or $4 quadrillion is what it's been estimated at.
Wow.
And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because we're talking about the gold and the money and trying to track all this stuff down, you know, and how can these numbers be so big and how they're probably going to be even so much bigger. It's insane. Well, here's one of our buddies. This guy is Bill Emmons. He's a chief economist for the St. Louis Fed. And I just wanted to show something that he says down here. Let me get over here. So, you know who Warren Buffett is. He's pretty much the largest, you know, the most successful stock trader, you know, investment guy. This is Warren Buffett literally saying that derivatives are financial weapons of mass destruction. You know, and that's coming from a guy that's been around for a long time. But then this guy, so someone wrote that in, you know, asking, you know, hey, what do you think about this? So asking the Fed guy, and he literally says, yes, derivatives are financial weapons of mass destruction. So, I mean, we're allowing this stuff to happen because the people we vote in have no idea what's even going on. Just like at the local level, at the federal level, they have no idea how the system is just being taken for granted in one way or another. But it's completely just operating. All that money is just completely fake. I mean, it's completely fake. And until we go to some kind of constitutional money, that'd be the greatest thing Trump could ever do, is reclassify or reevaluate gold, revalue gold, back our currency with gold and silver or commodities in some way, have real money, get rid of the IRS, get rid of the way the current banking system operates. I mean, you want to stop all of that pedophilia, all that crazy stuff, all, you know, because no one is going to use their own gold in one way or another to finance anything. War completely stops. I mean, war completely stops.
No, you're 100% right about that. All right, you went past. Now you got us to 216.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll get off of here for now. Great conversations. And you guys, I just can't tell you how much we appreciate you tuning in every morning, and so many of you. And, you know, like, share. I don't have to tell you people to comment. That's why I love you guys. You comment a lot, which helps me to shut up a little bit, which is kind of good. Just to let you know, we have Julianne Romanello coming up on Friday, and she's going to talk about the school to work pipeline and what it means to, you know, and labor, and what's going to happen if we shut down the education department. Are we just going to go, is it just all going to go to labor? Do we educate kids for jobs? These are really great questions. She's going to be with us here to talk about that on Friday. So we know that you'll be here because we love you. You love us. It's a mutual thing, mutual admiration society.
Well,
and we'll see. Please stay warm.
Yeah. Well, just think about that rabbit hole when we talk to Julianne about jobs in the future with the technology that's coming. I mean, what is really going to happen? It's going to be scary. I'm excited to talk to Julianne about that.
Yeah, I am, but I'm kind of scared too. So make sure you tune in, because that's going to be a really great one. We'll be here live 9 a.m. Friday morning, just like we are Wednesday and Friday morning. I think we hardly ever miss, don't we? Just during Christmas, just during December. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Stay involved, stay focused, and stay warm. We'll see you again on Friday.